Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for another PD Clergy Development webinar. If you're joining live, we want to invite you as we are talking today to feel free to ask questions. We learn better when we learn together. And so if you want to post those questions in the comments at any time, we'll see those and try to address those as they come up. Today, we are going to be talking about church hiring, church staff working on a team with a church. And so I couldn't think of a better person to ask than Reverend Mike Hilson. Mike and his wife Tina have been at their church for 26 years, and they have planted 10 churches in the US, 20 to 30 churches in Guatemala. And so they've had lots of experience bringing people on, interviews, maybe even sometimes having to let go of some staff. And so he was an expert on this topic. But I don't want to forget to mention the most important reason he's here today. He is here because he has 5 amazing grandkids, 3 amazing sons, and he's very proud to talk about them too. So welcome, Mike. We are really glad to have you here today.
It is good to be here, and thanks for asking me to do this, Carla.
Absolutely. And Mike and I were in seminary together for a bit, so we've known each other for a few years, and I have seen the amazing way he leads a team of people. So I know we're gonna hear some really great stuff today. So Mike, I'm gonna just start with a question on this topic. When we think about, there's people that have graduated recently, they're looking for a church job. Maybe this is the season of people checking out all of the job postings. And then there are church leaders they're looking to hire. So when you think about all of those things and just what does it mean to work in a church? What do we need? What are some of the things that have come to your mind on this topic? What would you like to share with us today?
Well, of course, as a leader, when you're building your team, when you're recruiting to build your team, you're considering what is it I need done, what is the role I need filled. But ultimately, what you're asking is, what is the one thing that I need to accomplish? So you're looking for somebody who has the capacity to accomplish whatever it is you're hiring for. A lot of times in a church that has 1 or 2 staff people total, you've got you're looking for generalists. What we need to accomplish is the church needs to grow. It needs to get stronger from where it is. We need to have higher quality in some of our programming. So you're looking for somebody that's kind of a generalist. In a larger church, you might be looking more for a specialist. And but that leader, that pastor, has to unpack, what is it that I need now. Let's say this. Inside of church world, it's a little different, I think, than inside of business world. Carla, I don't know if I've told you this or not, but my sons and I are now running pizza places as well. So we have some
I've seen some
restaurants.
of your social media stuff.
Yeah, so we have some restaurants. Hiring at the restaurants is very different than hiring at the church, because at the restaurant, it's a very simple, I need the pizza made, I need it made correctly and in a decent amount of time, and I need you to be able to clean a restaurant. Okay, so there's not a long list. I'm not as worried about a number of other things. I just need to know the pizza gets made and the customers are well cared for and everything's done with quality, right? So, but in the church, it's different. In the church, you are building community. And it's not that there's not community in a restaurant, but in the church, you're building community that becomes family. So when you bring in, I don't know if any of you have thought through this, but as a lead pastor, when you bring in a staff person, you are literally hiring somebody to help you take care of your children, of your family, of your parents, of your sister, and no, my sister and my parents don't go to church here. My kids don't even go to church here anymore because they planted another church down the road. But everybody here is that. The kids in the youth, in the children's ministry, and the youth ministry are my kids. And the people that are my age are brothers and sisters. And then the older ones, Miss Christine and Miss D, they're like parents to me, And so when you hire somebody into that, it's very, very different. What you're looking for now is not just the capacity to accomplish that one task. You have the task in front of you. You've named it. If you don't name the task, you're not going to hire the right person. But now you've got to get somebody in who can do that task and do it in such a way that they're building the family. I'm convinced that that takes balance of some things that are sometimes opposites. I think that truly good church staff people and truly good church pastors have to be able to balance some things that don't seem to go together. So, in order to talk about this, what I want to do in good pastor form is I want to put this in a biblical character. All right. Here's what I believe, and I've done a lot of research in Moses. I've done a lot of work in Moses, and wrote a book on the leadership style of Moses. And one of the amazing things to me about Moses is Joshua. I'm taken with Joshua and the way that he worked alongside Moses for 40 years, and so the way that he did that, I think I'm just going to make a bold statement. I don't know that I'm true. I don't know what I'm about to say is true, but I think it's true. Every leader that's worth his salt is dying to have a Joshua, somebody who is. I use this phrase a lot okay, let me back up. Here at New Life, we have New Life Live, which is our live services, and we have Where You Are Church, which is our online services. New Life Live, I'm the senior pastor in both cases, but New Life Live has a lead pastor. Our live church has a lead pastor named Theo Bolden. And then Where You Are Church has a lead pastor named Dave Sylvain. Here's how I describe Theo and Dave. They have the capacity to fly point, but they have a willingness to fly formation.
Hmm.
That's the definition of a solid staff person in a church, is the capacity to fly point, but a willingness to fly formation until it's time. And so in order to get to that, there's got to be balance of some things. So let me just take you through this. I've got some slides here. And the first balance that we've got to have, and I'm going to put these in order of how we experience each other, because from the point that we initial interview all the way to we've worked together a long time. Because I've got some staff here that I've worked with for 20 years. They've just been here that long, and so we've just in fact most of our staff is between 5 and 15 years. So people just stay a long time with us. And so, at any rate, so you got to balance these things. When you're first interviewing, when I'm first interviewing somebody, I'm looking for two things out of them. I want to see talent, but I want it balanced with humility. I gave you two verses here, one out of Exodus, one out of Numbers. The one out of Exodus shows is shortly after the children of Israel come through the Red Sea, and they were attacked by the Amalekites. Moses says to Joshua, gather some of our men together and go fight the Amalekites, and I'll stay on top of the hill. This is that famous story where we always remember Aaron and Hur holding his arms up. When Moses' arms are up, they're winning. When Moses' arms are down, they're losing. This is that famous story. But let's understand something. Joshua had to have the talent. Moses had already seen the talent in him for him to say, go and get some people together and go fight these guys. He didn't send Joshua in there going, well, I don't know if he's going to make it or not. He didn't do that. He had seen the talent in him. At the same time, when you get to Numbers 13 and they go in and they're searching out the land, in Numbers 13, verse 8, it describes Joshua as from the tribe of Ephraim, Hoshea, son of Nun. Literally, no fanfare. No fanfare. This is the guy who's already defeated the Amalekites for them. And yet, when you get to this listing, they even use his older name. He gets a new name. Joshua is a new pronunciation of the name, right? But there's this humility about him. I think that you've got to have that. Here's why. If you have talent causes a level of arrogance because you're just capable. I've been doing CrossFit with Pastor Dave, one of our pastors here, and the pastor of Where You Are Church, and he's a CrossFit trainer. He's level 2. He's an insane athlete, and we'll do box jumps, right? So box jumps, you're just jumping up on a box, right? Seems simple enough, and so he'll put that thing on 30 inches and just jump up there like a little gazelle bouncing up on top, and then he looks at me like, hey, go do that. And I'm like, go do what? Well, jump up on the box. Well, you better put it on the 20-inch side because I'm not going to make it that far. In his mind, it's not hard because he's talented. He's got talent in that. Theo, our live pastor, Theo can sing like an angel. And I give him a hard time because he's got a very high pitched voice. So I'll ask him quite often, do you intentionally put things in such a key that no man other than you can sing it just to make the point? He doesn't. He's not thinking about that. It's just a talent that causes him not to think. That not thinking can come across as arrogance. It's just capacity. It's not arrogance. The question you've got to ask, is there humility in this person? Because talent must be balanced with humility. If it's not, you're not going to have someone that you're gonna want to work with or enjoy working with, or you're not going to have someone that's going to take real good care of your people. If it's actual arrogance, you put your people at danger.
That's right.
I used to do this. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, how do you, this might just be, it's in your gut, right? Maybe, but how do you tell if somebody has that balance of talent and humility when you're meeting them in an interview or you're looking at a resume? How can somebody display their humility without making it look prideful?
Well, you actually can't get a higher level job here at New Life that way with just a resume, just a single interview or whatever. It used to be, it's not this way anymore, but it used to be that if you were going to get a pastoral level job at New Life, you had to come to Maryland and you spent the weekend at my house, in my house with me. And that way I had time to unpack who is this person and watch. I have done this before when I've had to do interviews and I needed to assess things, and the interview was, say, over dinner. I'll come to the end of the dinner, and I'm giving this away, so it won't work anymore. But I'll come to the end of the dinner and I'll say, all right, I've got the bill. You take care of the tip. And then I watch how well they tip. I had an older pastor take me out to dinner one time when I was in my 20s. And I had brought y'all got to remember, I'm 57 years old. So this is 30 some years ago. So don't anybody freak out about prices. But I took two $5 bills with me to pay for lunch. Right. So he, at the end of the lunch, which probably cost about $20, 15, $20. At the end of the lunch, he said, I got the bill, and he paid the bill. So I dropped down my $10 because this is a waitress, and I know they don't make any money, and she needs it more than I do, and I was planning on spending it on this meal anyway. He looked down and said, "Are you leaving all that?" And I said, "Yeah." He took his tip back off the table because he thought I left too much on the table. I settled in my mind at 23 years old. I was probably only about 23. I settled in my mind at 23, I'll never work for that man, because the generosity wasn't there, the humility wasn't there. And that's when I started the process of, when I interviewed somebody, I would say, you leave the tip. And if they were generous with this person, if they're generous with the waitress they don't know, they'll be generous with my people who they will know. If they're not generous with the waitress who they don't know, then I don't have any guarantees they're going to be generous with my people who they do know. And so that was just one little thing I would use. Having them at the house also, you just watch. You do need time with people to assess things like this, but that humility's got to be there. If I have hired people who had the talent without the humility, and it's never been a good experience. So I have had that happen.
Thanks for answering my question.
Yeah. But then you go the next step forward. Now I'm going to watch you work, right? When I watch you work, I'm looking for two things. I'm looking for drive versus integrity. And the reason I put these opposed to one another like this is because I think one can override the other if we're not careful. In drive, you've got the Lord said to Moses, "Take Joshua son of Nun, a man in whom the spirit of is the spirit of leadership, and lay a hand on him, and have him stand before Eleazar the priest and the entire assembly, and commission him in their presence, and give him some of your authority, so the whole Israelite community will obey him." he had enough drive that now in Numbers 27, he is being set up as the next leader. There's a lot of drive to that. Now, I want you to understand there are some people who can serve as a number two. They can fly that formation position, but they really don't have any desire or any drive to fly point. There's nothing wrong with that. That
Okay.
is 100% an acceptable way to feel. And maybe that's where God's called you. There's nothing, everybody's got to hear me. There's nothing wrong with that. But you have to understand the drive someone has in order to answer the question, are they long term going to take us where we want to be? Because if I have one pastor at one of our church plants, and the church doesn't grow much, but they ask the question, here's his statement. My goal is to help these people finish well. And his congregation is predominantly older folks. Well, that's his goal. That church is not going to grow long term. He is not going to fly point. He doesn't have desire to fly point. He wants to pastor and take care of these people and help them finish well. That's not there's nothing wrong with that as a goal. That is, I'm glad he's here. I mean, praise God he's here because he's taking care of some people that I would have made mad a long time ago. But he's doing a great job. But I have to understand what his goals are. Or if I'm trying to put him in the main leadership seat, he doesn't have the drive for that. But that's got to be balanced. That drive has to be balanced with integrity. And the integrity of Joshua was so high that when God calls Moses up on Mount Sinai to give him the Ten Commandments, he literally tells everybody else in the Israelite camp, including Aaron, by the way, tells everyone else, if you so much as set foot on this mountain, you're going to die. But then says, bring Joshua with you. I mean, wow, that's a pure heart. God saw something in Joshua there that was amazing. So Moses brings Joshua up the mountain with him. And so I think that there's got to be a balance. Now, let me say this. The reason I put these opposed to one another is sometimes people have so much drive that they will trade off their integrity to get where they're trying to go. You can't have that. If you see that start to happen inside the church, you're going to have to let that go because, if the integrity's got to be there. But there's other people, and here's where the Wesleyans are going to have an issue with me on this, is there's other people that have so much integrity that they're so afraid of breaking their integrity that they don't ever take a step forward. They live in this integrity frozen space where they can't get past anything. And so they lose drive because they're just trying to be so deep. Let me say this another way. There's some people trying so desperately to build their inner self that they never work hard enough on building their outer organization. The two things have to work together. And if they don't, if you don't have balance there, then you're not going to make it. If you lean too heavy on the drive side, all you're going to do is you're just going to hurt people in your way on your way forward. If you lean too heavy on the integrity side, you're going to lack the drive of trying to move forward. We're not called, if you're being hired at a church, you're not called to be a monk. You're called to be a leader. So is that fair enough?
Yeah, I think, as I was listening to you and thinking about that, there's a stewardship of the leadership that God has called you to. It says
Yes.
in that Numbers 27, he had the spirit of leadership.
Right.
So if you are focused so heavy on the integrity, which we don't want to tell anybody, don't be focused on integrity.
100% no.
Don't hear that, but it goes to stewardship. How are you stewarding the leadership that God has given you?
Right.
And that goes into that drive. So appreciate that balance so much.
Right. Let's go to the third one.
Yeah.
As we work together longer, there's going to come this point where we're going to see when you first start working with someone, you really just want to know they have the talent to accomplish what you have in front of them. As they work forward, you see, again, if we go back, you see that drive and that integrity start to play out. But then the longer you're with them, you actually get to know them. And once you actually get to know them, then you begin to balance out something else. Do they have the determination to go the full distance? And do they have, this is a step deeper than integrity. are they living in the holiness necessary to accomplish what we're after? In terms of determination, I jump past Moses, and I'm using this imagery from Joshua where he's battling the Amorites, and they are the battle is going on, and so Joshua asked God to hold the sun still, and it says the sun stopped. The sun stopped in the middle of the day and delayed going down about a full day. Okay, y'all, that's a prayer life. Let me just tell you, a whole day, and they kept fighting until they were finally done with the battle. Okay, that's determination. I'm willing to put in no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, no matter what. Okay, can I tell you something that'll get you in trouble here at New Life working with me? You can tell me, Mike, that's a bad idea. Mike, that won't work. Mike, that won't Mike, that's not even biblical. Mike, that's not even legal. I mean, you can tell me all those things, right? But don't ever look at me and say, "Oh, that's too hard." Mm. If I hear that's too hard, there's no such thing. Everybody hear me. There's no such thing as too hard. There is such a thing as something that is harder than I'm willing to work for. That's a real thing. But too hard is not a real thing. So, if someone tells me it's not, well, that's too hard, or if they give me the indication that's too difficult, I don't want to have to put in that many hours or whatever like that. I realize they don't have the determination to get where we need to go. Joshua was like, we're going to fight till we're done. And we're not stopping till we're done. We're going to keep going till we're done. And so there was a determination. However, that's got to be balanced with a holiness. I love this imagery in Exodus 33. Whenever the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, they all stood and worshiped, each at the entrance to their own tent. And the Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one does to a friend. Then Moses would return to the camp, leaving the tent of meeting. But his young aide, Joshua, son of Nun, did not leave the tent. He stayed in the presence of God as long as he possibly could. He lingered there with the presence of God. There was a desire. You don't see anything here that says that Moses asked him to stay and guard the gate, to guard the tent. He's lingering in the presence of God. Now, why are these two things important? If you're not willing to work, no matter how hard it is, at getting it done, you'll lack the determination to actually go the full length, the full length that God has for you. But there has to be a holiness to it too, because you can't just say, if there's not a holiness to it, then you'll say, I got it done because I refuse to quit. I'm strong. That's not true. Now, put these two against each other. Joshua in Exodus 33 refuses to leave. He lingers in the presence of the Lord. Dude, I mean, there's like the pastor you want to like hang out with and trust, right? But let's understand something else. In Joshua chapter 10, he's asking God to not let the sun go down because he needs to keep killing people. So understand that. He's slaughtering a people. They need to y'all, this is bad work, but it's got to be done. And yet it's holiness that keeps him from just being a bad person. Sometimes we never take up swords and slaughter people anymore. Let me make sure I say that.
Thank you for the disclaimer.
But there are times you have to do difficult work. You have to be determined enough to let somebody go who's not going to see the distance. You got to be determined enough to let somebody go who doesn't have the talent, or somebody who doesn't have the integrity. You find out they lack the integrity, whatever. You have to be able to do the hard, dirty, bad work. Sometimes you got to go to places, the tents in the woods out here where the homeless are, and you got to help them up, and you got to clean up behind them. There's a lot of dirty work you have to do, and you have to be determined to get that done, but you must balance it with holiness. People will always accuse you of not caring. Your job is not to make sure they don't accuse you of not caring. They're going to. Your job is to make sure they're wrong. You've got to be a person who lives in such a way that your holiness so exceeds the dirty work you have to do that you're remembered for lingering outside the tent of meeting not for slaughtering the Amorites.
Good.
See, so
That's a good word.
we good?
Yeah, that I don't have anything to add to that.
Okay.
That's a good word.
All right, let's go to the last one. And I think this is the one that if you're a young leader or an older leader, this one can bite. Let's say it that way. There has to be a balancing of loyalty versus ambition. A young man listen to this is in Numbers chapter 11. And a young man runs up and says to Moses, Eldad and Medad, I'm gonna put on my glasses because I'm old. Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. Joshua, son of Nun, who'd been Moses' aide since youth, spoke up and said, Moses, my Lord, stop them. But Moses replied, are you jealous for my sake? The answer is yes. I wish that all the Lord's people were prophets and that the Lord would put his spirit on them. Then Moses and the elders returned to the camp. Joshua is supremely loyal to Moses. And when other people are stepping into areas that Joshua views as this is Moses' area of leadership, he wants to defend that. He wants to immediately defend Moses, even to the point Moses has to say, no, I'm good. This is fine. But Joshua shows a distinct, a deep, and abiding loyalty for Moses. On the flip side, that has to be balanced with a personal ambition. You can't you can, but if you're going to end up riding point one day, then there has to be a personal ambition as well. Again, not everybody wants to ride point. Not everybody needs to ride point. I need to make that clear again. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, there's nothing wrong about that. There's not better and worse. It's just different. And so, but Joshua obviously had some plans. I use Joshua 1-6 here, which you're all very familiar with. But the idea here is that Joshua, some people say that when you take a new job, when you take over a new job, you should do nothing, make no changes for a year or two, and then start doing things. I'm not going to come against that. I am going to come against that.
I was gonna say, I know you, Mike. I can tell your body language.
I just don't think that's a good plan.
Right.
I think you need to walk in the door with some plans, especially if you've been there a long time. And Joshua's been, by the time we get to Joshua chapter 1, Moses has died, and Joshua has been the assistant to Moses for 40 years. He better have a plan. If he doesn't have a plan, he has zero ambition for him or for the people of Israel. So we don't want him as their leader. And so, but he does have that. What he's done, he's tempered his personal ambition with his God-called loyalty. God called him to be loyal to Moses. You see this again, by the way, in King David, where King David knows that he's called to be loyal to Saul, even though Saul has lost his mind. There's a loyalty that tempers this ambition. There's a plan. Once I'm in charge, we're doing this. There's a plan. And Joshua immediately moves forward with the plan. I mean, it's almost like they barely get past the time of mourning for Moses when Joshua says, line them up, boys, we're going after Jericho. There's very little time there. And so there's a plan, but that plan, that personal ambition is tempered by this loyalty. But the loyalty can't be allowed to suffocate the ambition. There's got to be a balance between the two. Now, let me say this. We read earlier that God said to Moses, allow, I believe it's this one. No, not that one. It's this one. Give him some of your authority here in Numbers 27. Give him some of your authority so that the whole Israelite community will obey him. That's important. Go back. If loyalty is not to be drowned, if ambition is not to be drowned beneath loyalty, then the leader, the Moses in the situation, must be willing to give authority to the Joshua in the situation. Go all the way back to the battle where Moses is holding his hands up. Moses didn't fight. Look, it was Joshua's job to do, and it was Moses' job to be.
Yeah.
And you have to understand your role in that. And so if you are the Moses character, you've got to constantly be giving authority to these people. And then that way you're not drowning their ambition underneath their loyalty to you. I've said this before, and I'll get in trouble for this, but I said this to another pastor of a large Wesleyan church, and and he just laughed at me because he immediately knew what I meant by it. I said, I don't want to be Charles Stanley.
Mm.
And Charles Stanley preached in his church, I mean, his whole life, never quit. But how many true leaders went through there, but never found the room to actually grow and become the next? And so I don't know, maybe Stanley did it. Maybe I don't know his situation. From the outside looking in, it looks like he never left room for that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be proud of the fact that I'm 95 years old and still preaching in my pulpit. You know what I'm saying? I want to look back and see the leaders we behind and the leaders we empowered and lifted up. So how does all this work? Let me tell you a story. We needed a worship leader at New Life. And so I was at a retreat, a pastor and spouse retreat, and this kid who was a part-time worship leader in our district somewhere came to the retreat with his wife, and they had just gotten married, and it was just cute as they could be, right? And turns out it was Theo Bolden. Well, Tina and I randomly ended up having as the Lord would have it. Tina and I had breakfast with Theo and Silvana, and just sat there and we just talked and we talked and we talked and we talked until finally, at the end of the conversation, I handed him my email address and my phone number. I said, "You need to contact me." So we hired Theo to be our worship leader, and he came in and he led worship, and he's amazing at it. He's got one of those voices that's just angelic, and it's just I've never seen him. I've never heard him sing a bad pitch, and he can play every instrument on the stage. I hate him for that, but he can do all that stuff I can't do. He can do that, and so he's amazing at it, right? But then we started seeing leadership in him. And so we needed some help because our youth pastor ended up being an 18-year-old girl who, by the way, is still on our staff and is doing a tremendous job now. And so we wanted somebody up beside her because she's leading a youth group at the time of 200 kids. And so Theo went in and helped coach her. And he did such a great job with it. We just kept watching him. And then I let him preach one time. Oh, my word. Boy can preach, And I learned, go all the way back to the beginning. I learned that the talent and the humility were there sitting around breakfast and then when he came in to interview, right? But then I watched the drive to actually bring everything to a higher level and the integrity to constantly say to me, "Pastor Mike, this is what went wrong, this is what went right, but we'll fix it, and here's what." I saw that happen. I saw his determination to build something better of himself and of everything around him. And then there was this holiness about him. He was so, it's natural for him. This is not a taught, you can't teach this, but it was natural for him to linger in a moment in worship without over lingering. Some people, they forget the audience is there and they just over linger. And now there's this awkwardness. He didn't do that, but he was able to linger. That's a holiness, right? That's a hearing the voice of the Holy Spirit. And then over time, I realized the loyalty and the ambition both are there. And so a couple years ago, I could tell you the same story about Dave Sylvain, by the way. Same thing happened with Dave Sylvain. We hired him to do something else, and now he's doing this. So a couple years ago, we realized that the only elected authority on our campus was me. I was elected by the congregation, and but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at the time 7, 8 churches underneath the leadership of this particular group, and I was the only elected authority. So once I came to trust their loyalty, but know that long term their ambition would be there, I had Theo and Dave elected as the lead pastor of each of those 2 churches. I literally right now do not have the authority to fire them. I've given that away. Why? Because they earn my trust. And they earn my trust to the point that I will give them authority. I would literally have to go to a local church conference and have them unelected. that loyalty, that faith, that, to use a term that our general superintendent uses so adeptly, so often, that mutual voluntary submission to one another is they will, when I'm gone and God's thrown me in the sands of the Sinai, uh, they will um, they will cross the river and take Jericho, and I know that. And so I think the loyalty and ambition has got to go both ways. So at any rate, that's what I've got for you.
Well, I got some more questions though for you,
Okay.
Mike. Okay.
All right.
So I didn't warn you ahead of time for these.
Okay.
Okay. So
Oh, that'll be fun.
I'm gonna tell you both of them, and so you can kind of see they're opposite. So we've had some, we actually had a comment on this in the chat, and then others, they're saying, hey, I'm putting my resume out there and I'm not even getting anywhere. I'm not getting
Hmm.
an email, a callback, an interview, nothing. So there's one issue, and there's a whole host of variables in that, and I know that, but you're an expert, so maybe you can. And then the other one is how, when you have a leadership position and you have, whether you're a lead pastor with staff or you're a staff with a team, how do you lead them? We've been talking a lot about you as the employee, but when you're the employer, if you will, as a church, how do you lead well? And maybe rather the question would be, what should you not do? What are some things that you need to be careful that you're not doing, so you're leading your team as well as you hope they are doing as well as a staff? So those are the two questions. Answer them in whatever order you want.
Well, let's go to the first one. Uh, if you're not getting responses from sending out resumes, you need to get with somebody you trust, a real advisor that you trust, and start asking very transparently why. And I want to say that I say that for this reason. You're probably applying for the wrong jobs that you're not really qualified for, or something's not coming across well in your resume or the way you present yourself. And I say that for this reason. Um, 35 years ago, when I started in ministry, I knew full well that job security was not an issue because there weren't enough pastors to go around. The situation's worse now, significantly worse. I can tell you people in my position are having a hard time finding qualified people to come in and do things. So it may be that you're applying for a job that you're not quite yet qualified for, or something's coming across wrong in your resume or in the way you're presenting yourself. Find someone that you trust, but you will let speak to you very bluntly and honestly, and ask them, what am I doing wrong? So I would start there. Um, let me pause, let me give one caveat to that. There is, in larger churches especially, a bias toward hiring internally.
Mhm.
And the bias is because, so here I'm going to help you overcome that. The bias is because when you hire externally, when you hire when you hire externally, you have people that come in and want to teach you what you're doing wrong.
Oh.
And that has happened numerous times, and so you can't do that. You're not doing everything right, and everybody knows that, but you can't fly in from the outside and just say, well, let me show you how to do it. Sorry, you're not Yoda yet. You just showed up. You're the baby Luke Skywalker. You're not even Yoda, so don't even try. So but what has to happen, the way you overcome that, is you need to lean heavily on that humility side, so that the pastor you're talking to begins to have a trust that is naturally not there. When we raise up somebody from inside, it's not that we do everything right. They see what's wrong. They're inside. They see all the warts and pimples and everything. They're there, but they're bought in. You get to question things after we know you're bought in. You don't get to question things when you first come and nobody knows if you're bought in yet or not. So I don't know exactly the answer to that. There is a bias toward hiring from the inside that is going to be a limitation. I will say, let me say one other thing, if you'll allow me. Let's get on my own little soapbox here. I think that there's also a bias among young people, among the folks coming out of college right now, the young men and women who are looking for ministry opportunities, I think there's a bias among them to try to find a staff position at a desirable large church.
Yep.
That's not how, that's very new. You need to understand in terms of the church world, that is very new. What was normal up and what's been normal for the past, I don't know, 2000 years is to take a small church and work your way into it. You may work your way from a small church to a larger church. You may grow the small church you move into. You may work your way from a small church to a staff position to a larger church. I think that there's a bias to not go to these small churches because, well, they don't want to grow anyway and they're going to beat me up. Well, they're only going to beat you up if you, I mean, look, you can navigate it. That's all I'm trying to say. Tina and I took our first church. We went on staff at a church of 180 and did that for 2 years, and then took a church of 80. And that was our first church in Hickory, North Carolina. And then came up here and took this church of about 100 when we first started. And so you've got to be willing, I think, to take what's there. You've also got to be willing to move. If you're not willing to move, that's going to limit your options a great deal. So that's the first question. I hope that was helpful. And I really don't want to be offensive at all. Please don't be offended.
Those are truths. They weren't offensive. It was truth. Good stuff.
On the second question, depends on what level you're leading at when it comes to leading a team and what steps should you take. There's the obvious, you need to read some management books and you got to hold the meetings and you got to have all the organizational stuff in place, right? But let me just immediately jump to the 30,000 foot level. You got to, as a leader of people, it's more important to walk with than it is to work with. You've got to walk with people. Let me say this another way. I don't think you can effectively lead a long-term staffing situation in a Greek classical manner. You must do it in a rabbinical manner. Greek classical stands in front of the class and teaches you what you need to know because I'm the expert, you need to learn. Rabbinical says, yes, I'll give you some lessons, and yes, I'll give you some structure, and yes, we'll do sermons, we'll do all that. But for the most part, you're going to walk with me. You're going to cook with me. You're going to make the tents with me. We're going to live this out together. And I think if you are actually going to lead long-term teams, if you're going to make it to, let's come to my side of this. If you're going to make it to a relationship where you have loyalty and ambition balancing each other, you're going to have to do that in a rabbinical sense, a walking with, rather than simply a leading down to. If you're leading down to, no, don't get me wrong. There are times you have to be the authority in the room. Okay. There are times you have to do that. There are times you have to walk into a room and say, I'm taking over this meeting. Everybody sit down. I'm going to tell you something. You have to do that. But that should be minimal. You should be able to walk with and journey with. And I think that's what's been one of my great privileges, one of my great joys here, is just walking with and ministering with. I had an incredible, strongest team, I have the strongest team I've ever had right now. Strongest team prior to that. Gail Bryan was my executive assistant and CFO, and Chris Wagnon was my executive pastor and basically director of operations. They were incredible. I mean, we worked together for like 15 years. They were incredible, right? To this day, Gail's husband, Chris, is still the pastor I mentioned who pastors our Kneeling Point Church. And I'll see Gail in the office and we talk constantly. We're good friends. Chris Wagnon is one of my best friends, and we actually walk together whenever we can. We walk together during the week, and he's the guy I'll call to come and walk around the church when things are kind of falling apart in my head. And so the fact we walk together like that in our professional lives actually turned us into great friends before and after our professional lives together. And I think that's a great joy. I look forward to the day that I'm just celebrating as if they're my own kids, what Theo and Dave are doing. And so anyway, I that's my answer to the second.
Great. I
It
love
may
it.
be a little ethereal, but it's my answer to the second one.
No,
So
I absolutely. But it made me think of and as I was reflecting a little bit on this concept of loyalty, I think
mhm,
I've got time for this question. So I think there are times when loyalty can be a negative thing. I
mhm,
like a blind loyalty.
yes.
So how I don't even know how to ask the question, Mike, but how do you
Well,
what do you do with that? Help me out with this loyalty versus unhealthy and blind loyalty.
on that side, that's got to be something. There, let me go back. Your holiness and your integrity.
Mhm.
I'm only speaking of the employee now.
Yeah.
Your holiness and your integrity have to play into this loyalty because loyalty is not I will help you be bad. Loyalty is I will walk with you while we do good. And so if you see this is not a blind loyalty, if you see your leader doing something that is wrong, damaging to people, of course, immoral or illegal, you've got to call that out. You've got to. But at the same time, you can't be calling out things that are really just preferential. Well, he made me come in at 6 o'clock in the morning and clean the church. Okay, well, I've done toilets here. I've cleaned toilets here. Tight ship is not immoral. You may not like it, but it's not immoral. However, blind loyalty is what gives you now we're going to say something nobody on this call, but maybe not even you, Carla, is going to remember, but it's what gives you a Jim Baker, from PTL back in the day. Everybody was so loyal to him that nobody called him on it. Next thing you know, he's had affairs and he's stolen money from people. And you can't do that. You can't allow that to happen. Your loyalty to a person cannot override your integrity or your holiness. It
Right.
has to, it's not a blind loyalty. I don't expect these guys. In fact, if loyalty and ambition are going to work together in this balance, what has to happen is there's got to be a willingness on the part of the Moses to hear the Joshua when Joshua says, this is messed up.
Right.
And so those things have to, you can't just have a blind loyalty. By the way, there is a Holy Spirit and your boss is not him.
That's right. That's right.
So you don't need to be that loyal to anyone. You've got, look, even my kids, my sons will come tell me, Dad, you need to not do this, or you need to do that, or they do that. And loyalty, oh my word, you don't want to get up between me and any of my boys. There's a lot of loyalty there, but they're also very honest. So we've got to be that way.
Good
Proper
word.
relationships work that way. Thank you for that question. That's good.
Oh yeah. I got time for one more.
Okay.
If you're good. Okay, so a lot of people, whether they're students that just graduated or they're in ministry, they've gone to school for it. They've got the educational background. If you were, from your experience, what's a skill, a talent, maybe even a class that you're not going to get in traditional school that you say, hey, if you're going to be a pastor, you're going to be on staff, you really need to learn this.
Number one,
Okay.
team building.
Okay.
If you can't, okay, I'm just going to make the statement. If you can't build teams, you can't build a church.
That's good. That's
If
good.
you can't build teams, you can't build a successful ministry. And you don't learn that really in schools because in school, it's really the individual. I did my homework, I did my paper, I got my scores, and it's really very individualistic. I know they do some team projects and whatnot, but everybody hates those because
Right. Nobody likes group
nobody
projects.
wants to do that. But you have to be able to build teams. If you can't draw people around you and build teams, you cannot build a church. You can't build an organization. You can't build a ministry. It takes teams. You cannot do this by yourself. And so you've got to be able to establish teams. That is not personality driven, by the way. Some people will dismiss me at that point and say, well, you've just got a personality that does that naturally, so that's just no, because I have well, let's just take it this way. Our general superintendent, Wayne Schmidt, is excellent at building teams. He and I have opposite personalities.
Yes, you do.
We do. And yet we both build good teams. I have a very different philosophy of ministry and very different personality than say Kevin Myers down at 12 Stone. But we both build teams. This is not a personality thing. You've got to learn to build teams. And Chris Wagnon, who worked with me here, I told you is one of my best friends, is an extreme introvert. Chris would just as soon climb into a cave somewhere and spend the rest of his life taking care of obscure plants than to do anything else. Yet he can build teams because he knows he's got to do that to accomplish his goals. And so you've got to build teams. I know some extroverts that can't build teams. They're just constantly starting parties. They're not teams, and that won't work either. So you've got to be able to build teams. That's number one. I think number two, though, is to remember there is this thing here because we were surrounded by military. And one of the bases next to us it's a Navy base that focuses in on what they call EOD, explosive ordnance disposal. You can have a degree in explosive ordnance disposal. I still don't want to go with you the first time you do it. I want you to show me how many times you've done it, not how well you did in class, and understand that same disconnect. Well, you have to have a class. I'm not, you got to have that. You got to learn, you got to be educated, but I want to know how many times you've actually done it. Because that's what's going to tell me I'm safe and I'm not going to blow up.
So with that, one of the things, I guess I'll say this and maybe get your comments. Sometimes you're not going to find the full-time job. You might not even find the part-time paid position at a church, and maybe it's volunteer, or maybe that experience is not worthless. It's not thrown away. And so can you speak to that a little bit of how, even if you're not finding that dream job, you're not finding the thing that you think you're supposed to do, okay, so how do you continue to get experience?
Well, let me take you another step further. It's not even lesser to be bivocational. The Apostle Paul was bivocational. So it's not lesser. It's just different. It's just a different way of doing it. And you have to be willing, even if that's not where you end up. When Tina and I first moved here, we were facing a church that we figured out after we accepted the role that the church had not paid a mortgage payment in a year. They were behind on all their bills. The organization could literally not even get a credit card. I had to use my own credit card. And so it just been rough, it'd been bad. They were doing their best. It's just been bad. And so when we moved here, we brought staff with us. John Ward, who I think but John came with us, and so we made a pact. The four of us did, John and his wife, me and my wife. We made a pact that even if we had to get jobs and work second jobs, we were going to make this work. And so we were prepared to do that. And you have to be prepared to do that, I think, at all points, because if it's a calling from God, you make it happen no matter what. And if that means you're going to be bivocational, both of my grandfathers were bivocational, I think almost their entire ministry. And so, it's something you just have to be ready to do. I've been fortunate enough that that's not something I've had to do. We're doing it now because I'm helping build a family business that we'll leave to the kids. But it's not something we've been forced to do. But if it is something that happens, then it's not lesser and it's not wrong. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you don't have capacity. It means God's going to do this a new way. And someone who is bivocational can reach an entire segment of the population that'll never listen to me because they see me as the guy at the big church that just gets the paycheck. And he's just saying what he's got to say because of the paycheck. Where when they look at you and they'll follow you when they would never follow me. And I think God needs all kinds to reach all kinds. So don't be discouraged by that. Don't be let down by that. Just stay in there.
Good.
Stay at it. God's called you.
Good. That's a good final word, Mike. I appreciate that so much. We hope that this has been an encouragement to you. Hopefully you got some information. Well, this recording will be on our website too, if you want to come back. I just want to say thank you, Mike,
Oh,
for
thank you.
being willing to join us and share your wisdom. And we joked beforehand that you were doing the pastor thing and bringing scripture, but I love the biblical foundation you laid. You're not just bringing some modern leadership principles, you are showing where it is in scripture. So thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you.
We are done for our spring semester of webinars. So want to remind you, we won't be joining together in June or July, and look for some new topic, new direction for the fall, fourth Thursday of the month. So thank you all for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.